Hey, folks, and welcome to another edition of Dog Walk Talk presented to you by DawgsHQ. As always, I'm your host, Jake Roos, and with me, as always, the man, the myth, the legend, Palmer Toms, beat writer over at DawgsHQ. Palmer, hope you got some rest last night. Don't know how well anybody in Dog Nation slept after that one.
Yeah. Certainly good to make the trip back from Atlanta to Athens. And tough one for Georgia fans coming out of that game. Certainly good to get the news of today's college football playoff berth because it's essentially a new season. Everything that's happened before today, we're recording here Sunday night after Georgia lost on Saturday and the playoffs were announced earlier today. And nothing before today really matters. Once those Final Four teams are announced, Georgia will be playing Michigan in the Orange Bowl on New Year's Eve. And so, now it's a 2-game season, win and you stay alive, lose and you go home. And I think that's what Georgia fans have to keep in mind here when you watch, when you see SEC championship highlights, when you're watching these college football playoff shows and such. You're not going to hear a lot of great talk about Georgia coming out of that game because there wasn't a lot of great stuff to say about the Dogs. But, putting it into perspective, the goal is to be one of these Final Four teams when coming into the year. And then once you get here, anything can happen.
Yeah, like you said, Dogs push and reset on the season, essentially back to 0-0, if you want to consider it that way. I don't want to spend too much time harping on what happened in Atlanta because I think everybody probably has heard a lot about it. But let's dive in on it just a little bit. I mean, we have to talk about it somewhat. I'll be honest with you. I picked Georgia to win. I was surprised how it shook out. I could not have foreseen what happened in Atlanta happening in the fashion that it did. And perhaps that was me being naive. Perhaps that was me being, maybe too close to the program and watching that and haven't seen what Georgia's done all season. But I do think we did a fair job leading up to that of kind of preaching this idea of respect for Alabama and Nick Saban. And rightfully so. I mean, I think that was all completely justified, and you saw why we continue to harp on it so frequently here on Dog Walk Talk. Overall, I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. It was a piss poor performance. I thought that it was bad in all facets. The defense was completely lackluster. Looked unlike anything Georgia's put on the field this year. Secondary looked confused. Front seven created no pressure whatsoever. Alabama had their way offensively. Jamison Williams, there was no answer for. And Dogs just got flat out smoked on that side of the ball, which was a huge surprise. I mean, that was what I said going into the game. That was in my bold prediction I said, let your historically great defense carry this. Well, your historically great defense got exposed. And I think that you got to go back to the drawing board if you have any hope of, even making it past Michigan, let alone, a possible rematch with Alabama or anybody else for that matter. You can't put the product that you put out there on the field last night and expect to win much offensively. I don't know who said this on Twitter, but I'm definitely copying this from somebody. So my apologies to whoever it was, but it caught my eye and I thought it was correct. To me, Stetson Bennett, maybe not the reason you lose that game, but when you got in that hole, you felt like it was over, probably because Stetson Bennett was the quarterback in that game. And I did not understand the decision not to go to JT when that was the case. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there. That's something that hopefully we'll poke around and find out here over the course of the next week as to, maybe we can get some insight into this quarterback situation. I mean, Kirby's not going to give anything up, certainly. So you're going to have to go kind of back channel here and to find out what's going on if there is something. But, offensive line under a little bit of duress, kind of played better. I mean, as the game went on, Georgia got better. And that was probably what was frustrating. And I wrote that in the keys to the loss yesterday is it was just too little too late for Georgia. The slow start combined with just an inability to stop Alabama. You get some 3 and outs, just nothing's going your way. And then, you feel like you're in it there. Maybe, I don't know, there was about 10 minutes left in the game. And it was like a 2-score game. And it was like, maybe this is possible. But I just never felt like Georgia was in control after Jameson Williams kind of took over. And I think that it could have even been worse if John Mechie would have been available. So, it was what it was from my perspective. I was sitting right next to you, Palm, but I don't know that we hashed all this out yesterday. Your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, you did a really good job of summarizing the game there. I think that it was just an all-around demoralizing performance for the Dawgs. I think that, I like to kind of break it down position by position. And for me, it starts with the quarterbacks. Stetson Bennett, like you said, wasn't the reason that Georgia lost, but he didn't do anything to help Georgia win.
Right.
In fact, he probably, and he said it earlier this week, or I guess last week at this point. But he said, more often than not, you do more to lose a game than you do win. And I felt like that was certainly the case here on Saturday. I think that you look back on Georgia's loss to Alabama in 2020 with Stetson Bennett at the helm, and I think that he made a lot of the same plays, mistakes that he made in that game. I think, I mentioned it to you, but what has made Stetson Bennett a better quarterback this year is he's not afraid to take off and run with the ball and just pick up yardage when he needs to. And rather than trying to, and he's said it, rather than trying to run around and be Johnny Manziel and extend a play to throw it, he has just taken off and run with the ball. He's not afraid to do it. He's not afraid to put his shoulder down or slide or, get in the heart of the defense and take on a hit from a tough linebacker. And he didn't do that against Alabama. He did pick up a couple of first downs with his feet, with his legs, but I think that there were opportunities for him to do even more.
Well, I'll tell you what he's not used to doing is throwing the ball 48 times in a game.
Exactly. Well, and Georgia isn't used to playing from behind. I mean, right. we looked it up in the press box, and his previous career high was last year against Alabama, also when they were playing from behind. So the passing attempts definitely is a factor of the way the game played out. But I think that, if you look at his interceptions, it was just mistakes that you're not used to seeing Stetson make. Him trying to run around, extend a play, and then throw the ball into contested coverage on the first one, and then simply did not see the safety coming across the middle on the pick six that Jordan Battle took to the house. And that kind of felt like that one put the game away. I think that if you look at what Georgia did coming out of the half, the Bulldogs were able to get several stops. I mean, it was 24-17 going into the half. Alabama comes out and scores, and that was certainly backbreaking for Georgia to allow a touchdown before the half and then a touchdown coming right out of the half. The 2-for-1 punch special for Alabama there. But I think that Georgia the defense tightened up a little bit at that point. They were able to get some stops, but Georgia wasn't able to turn it into scores. They drove into, Alabama territory, throw an interception. Then they drive into Alabama territory, go for it on fourth down, can't convert. Then, really with their backs against the wall, they throw that pick six deep in there, close to midfield. I think it was intercepted at the 40 or 42 of Georgia. And Battle took it to the house. And, I think that was it. I think that Georgia, I'll have to go back and watch the game again to really break down Todd Monken's play calling, but I think that he abandoned the run a little bit early. I felt like, Georgia was able to not necessarily gash Alabama, but they were picking up 4 or 5, 6 yards a pop early in that game. And I was surprised with their ability to run the ball, the way that they were, moving the ball that way. And I felt like there were times that Georgia probably could have taken a shot with some of the ability that they were having to run the ball, some of the success. But they, kept going to it and they kept picking up yardage. And I think that says a lot. But ultimately they did have to go away from it. And like you said, Bennett throws the ball 48 times. I think if you had said to me before the game, Stetson Bennett throws for 340 yards and 3 touchdowns, I would have been pretty confident in Georgia's chances to win the game. But, it's the 2 interceptions and the inability to convert in the red zone, that really did him in. Brock Bowers, great game from him. In terms of the pass catchers, I think that the two, if there were 2 positives that you do take out of this game, it's that George Pickens made a play. He is, was targeted 5 times, and had 2 catches in those 5 times. For 41 yards, but the 37-yarder downfield really reminded, I said it to you, you could really see all the fans in red and black stand up with that one as that ball was going to George. When he came down with it, the crowd really understood what that meant. And that meant that George Pickens was back. There's a plan for him to continue to be back. You saw that come into play here. He did more than he did against Georgia Tech. He did more against Georgia Tech than he did against Charleston Southern. Of course, against Charleston Southern, he dresses out, doesn't play, ends up dressing out against Tech, plays, has 1 catch. But really wasn't a big factor in that game plan. This one, he was a little bit more of a factor. Like I said, 5 targets, 2 receptions, 41 yards. And I think that with 3 more weeks of prep before Michigan, I think that he will be a big factor in that one. He was on the field early and often, and I think that that'll continue to be the case. I think that we can potentially see Pickens back into the playmaker that he was. But really the big playmaker for Georgia yesterday was Brock Bowers, 10 receptions on 16 targets, which is outstanding to me. That number stands out a lot. 16 targets, 139 yards, 1 touchdown. Going back to the play calling, I really would have liked to see, in order for Georgia to give themselves the best chance to win, I feel like they needed to get the ball downfield more. When they did abandon the run and they went to the pass, that it was a lot of screens. And I felt like, if Georgia was going to try and get back into this game playing from 2 scores down, they were 2 or 3 scores down, they were going to have to get the ball downfield. And they weren't able to do that. I don't know whether that's Stetson Bennett. That's not necessarily his game. His is more, short to intermediate passes and taking what's given to him versus getting the ball out downfield. He's shown that he's able to do it, but is that his MO? Is that what he wants to do? I don't necessarily think it is. I think that's more JT Daniels' style. I think he is a guy that can get the ball out quickly and accurately downfield. He's not going to make the plays that Stetson does with his legs. And that's certainly been, the mobility has certainly been a factor for in the decision-making for Georgia to roll with Stetson as long as they have. But I think that it's absolutely something that you've got to consider. Flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, and I know I'm going long here, running out of breath a little bit, but I think that the way that Georgia played Alabama, they're going to have to reconsider, obviously. If they end up playing Alabama again, it's why it's tough to beat a team twice, because if you're Alabama, you don't want to change a thing from the game plan that you just had, versus if you're Georgia, you have nothing to lose but changing, by changing your game plan. So if you're Georgia, you want to, obviously you want to be able to get pressure on the quarterbacks, but you don't necessarily want to put as much pressure, if you're not able to do that, like Georgia wasn't able to do, against Alabama yesterday. You don't want to put that pressure, in turn on your secondary. And that's especially playing some of these playmakers that Alabama has. Obviously, if Georgia were to match up with them again, they wouldn't have John Mechie, and Jameson Williams would be that guy. I think that they've obviously got other playmakers outside of those 2, though, with the talent that they recruit. Brooks is another guy. Ja'Cory Brooks, that is, who caught the game-tying touchdown against Auburn. Highly rated guy coming out of high school. I think that there are guys that will step up in absence of Mechie. Again, just like Georgia has 3 weeks to, kind of consider things, Alabama does too. And that'll be a point of emphasis for them. But I think that you've got to relieve some of the pressure that's put on the secondary by not getting pressure on the quarterback. And whether that is getting more pressure on the quarterback, it's a lot easier said than done when you're playing an offensive line like what Alabama has, one that stepped up to the task yesterday against Georgia. So I think that overall you've got a lot to consider if you're Georgia. a lot of time to consider it, and a matchup that's probably pretty favorable for the Bulldogs in terms of just game style. Michigan wanting to be a more physical team, run first team. That's what Georgia likes to do. They like to stop the run. They don't like to be put in situations where they are, being pressured on the back end of things. Kirby even said it today. We talked with him after the announcement of the matchup with Michigan and the Orange Bowl selection. I think that, he said some of the flaws of the secondary have been covered up by their ability to get pressure, and that was certainly evident yesterday. So I think that maybe this matchup with Michigan might be favorable, but you've certainly got things that you want to address. If like you said, if they end up matching up with Alabama again, certainly a lot that you're going to want to address before doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can take that for granted at this point. I mean, you just got to see a different performance. You got to see a different team. And perhaps this is, you saw all the punditry and the ESPN guys say, I think this makes Georgia a more dangerous team. I think this makes Georgia a bigger threat. It's hard to win the rematch. And I agree with all those points. All that is true. I mean, if you look at it, just break it down from a very basic standpoint. But the fact of the matter is, if Georgia plays like that again, they're going to lose again. And it doesn't really matter who they play. It could be Alabama. It could be Michigan. It just is what it is. Like I said, just bad all around. I mean, there's nothing else really for me to say about it. I think everybody knows that. I think everybody saw it. And it was
a tough pill to swallow.
It was.
With the regular season that Georgia had, the expectations coming into this
game. It was hard to believe. It was hard to believe that Georgia had morphed into that team coming off of what we've seen all season, whereas Alabama, coming off of that Auburn game, morphed into a totally different team. Suddenly their pass protection clicking on all cylinders, just out there dominating, having their way with it. I think listen, and I said this on the board, and I'll say it again. Kudos to Nick Saban and Doug Marrone, man, because they fixed whatever was leaking. I mean, they were coming into this game averaging about 3 sacks given up on Bryce Young a game. Georgia came into the game averaging about 3 sacks a game. They kept Bryce Young clean yesterday. That was a huge, huge difference in this game. No question about it in my mind. We've got weeks to break this down as many ways as we possibly can, and I want to devote a few whole shows to some of these topics. But I guess just quick thoughts on Miami in general. The Orange Bowl. I'll be quite honest with everybody. I don't know much about Michigan. I didn't watch much of them this year. I'm gonna have to go back and check out some of them and see. I don't watch much Big Ten football, just in general. I really don't watch much football outside of the University of Georgia because I just don't have time. That's my Saturdays are pretty well stocked with Georgia football. So, we see a couple of the big matchups around the nation, but it's not like, I take time to watch every single one I can. But Michigan, it's an interesting team. I mean, they've got a lot of talent. Jim Harbaugh, a great coach, in my opinion, a guy who finally got over the hump and won that big one. So, they got to be riding high after all that time. And they've made it happen. I mean, it's they deserve to be where they are. Miami on New Year's Eve, that should be cool, I guess. I don't know. We'll be in the damn press box when it turns midnight. So I'm not sure it really matters too much for us to be in South Beach, but the rest of the week should be fun. I'm interested really to see how Georgia fans will travel after this game. I will say, having spoken to some people that were looking into tickets have skyrocketed in the last couple of hours. I've got some friends of mine that bought tickets for about 200-ish earlier in the week, thinking that, hey, maybe that's where Georgia ends up. And if not, then someone else will end up there that will want to buy a playoff ticket. And I think what I heard earlier today, thank goodness I'm not having to buy a ticket to that game. But I heard
800 was about the number.
Well, let's be fair now. There's probably a lot of people from Michigan who are looking to get out of Michigan in December to go hang out in South Beach. So I can't say I blame them for that either. It's a different kind of cold up
there. And another thing, just as much along the lines of Michigan wanting to get out of there, Michigan fans are probably reacting to this playoff run,
no question,
potential to, make a splash, on the national scene, just as much as Georgia fans did in 2017. Think about the way that Georgia fans traveled out to Pasadena, not necessarily an easy trip there. First college football playoff appearance there, first, trying to get the monkey off their back of a national championship. Michigan dealing with a lot of the same narratives that Georgia is there. We're able to, like you said, get that first championship win under Jim Harbaugh, able to knock off Ohio State for the first time in what seems like forever. But I think that you're right. There probably are a lot of Michigan fans that are eating up those tickets early on and ready to get down to South Beach.
Well, let's not kid ourselves. Michigan has a incredibly proud fan base, an incredibly rich history. This is what they've been waiting on. And there's probably nothing that would be sweeter than knocking off, Johnny come lately Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs, who are trying to overthrow the whole college football system, and especially Nick Saban at Alabama when they get the chance. So, that would be a sweet one for them. Looks like the line I'm seeing on this one, 7 early. I'm not even going to bother getting into that because it's forever away. Who the hell knows what can happen between now and then. We've probably got babies to be born, arrests to be made, any number of things that can befall either team. So we won't dive into that one just yet. We'll wait for that a little bit closer. But like I said, I think it'll be fun. It should be an interesting matchup. Certainly. You got 2 storied programs, 2 of the biggest in college football.
Somehow they've only met twice.
Yeah. And this will first matchup since 65. Is that right? 65. Yep. That's what I had. I said that, or unless you count that satellite camp that Jim Harbaugh held in Lee County a few years back with that famous shirtless picture. But like I said, I think it's an interesting matchup, and it'll tell the tape. You'll see. Did Georgia get this all cleaned up over 3 weeks, or is the Georgia we saw in the SEC championship really who Georgia is and has been, and they just haven't been exposed? That's all it's going to boil down to. But like I said, we've got plenty of time to discuss all of that. We've got plenty of time also to discuss recruiting coming up as well. We won't dive into that just yet, but make sure to stay tuned to DawgsHQ this week because we'll have plenty coming in that vein as well. We've got plenty of post-game coverage still coming too. Just thought pieces and just evaluating. I think it's fair to take a look back now at the entire regular season and have a time to reflect on that. You hear this narrative, was Georgia playing a super soft schedule the whole time? I don't know. That seems like something we could probably dive into and look into, and maybe it was the case. Who knows? I'm not writing anything off after yesterday because, like I said, completely different performance from what we've seen to this point.
I'll tell you folks, I'm going to do a month in review piece like I did for September, like I did for October. Waited on it for November just because of who Georgia played in that month, with Charleston Southern and Georgia Tech, and knowing that there was going to be a long layoff after an SEC championship game, knowing that the narrative of how you define Georgia's regular season was going to largely be set by that game. So I'll have that piece coming y'all's way at some point this week. Like you said, lot of just big overarching themes, overview of this regular season. A lot of time between now and December 31st to kill, to break down Michigan. I'm sure we'll end up doing some crossover stuff with the On3 site there. Excited to have another opportunity to do that. And, ultimately excited to talk some, important football. Like I said, it's a new season for Georgia. nobody will care about that Alabama loss if you go win these next 2 games and you're national champions.
Quick question. Does Georgia have an Alabama problem?
We'll see. Right now, yeah, I think
I say yes.
I mean,
I say yes, but with the caveat, so does everybody else. But I will say Georgia's got a big monkey on their back. And I put the question out on Twitter. I said, look, and this is a total hypothetical. It's not at all what I think it's going to happen. But I said, imagine a scenario where Georgia wins their playoff game and Alabama loses theirs. Does that and Georgia goes on to win a national championship? Does it make it feel a little bit more hollow than it might otherwise? And I was really surprised at how split that reaction was. There were a lot of people who came out and said, look, it doesn't matter. I don't care who we play. I don't care what it takes. All I want's the trophy. And there were simultaneously a lot of people who said, we've got to kill that dragon in order to make this right.
Well, and like I said in my response to that tweet was, if let's say that does happen, a lot of football to be played before we can even talk about that, but
sure.
And a lot of time to kill before we can even talk about that. But if it were to happen and play out that way, the narrative of Georgia can't win the big one just becomes Georgia can't beat Alabama.
Sure.
And I think that those two have been tied hand in hand several times. You look back at these, now 3 championship game meetings under Kirby Smart, against Nick Saban.
Alabama's been the big one.
Absolutely. and let's be honest, that was probably the big one for Georgia last year too.
Sure.
I mean, if you could maybe make the case that the Florida game was, since it had Eastern championship implications. The Peach Bowl was a New Year's Six bowl, but I think that, when you think back on Georgia's season last year, the game that sticks out the most is that Alabama loss.
Yep.
The game that sticks out the most about those, previous couple seasons have been the losses to Alabama. And I think, now 2019 excluded because they didn't end up playing the Tide, with LSU being the dominant force that they were that year. I do think that there is a huge monkey on Georgia's back. It's the elephant in the room, no pun intended. And it's Alabama, whether Georgia can beat them or not.
I agree. Hard to say otherwise. But like I said, we'll dive into all that moving forward. So, like I said, get over to DawgsHQ. Plenty coming when it comes to month in review. Palmer's going to keep you stocked up with team news between now and December 31st. We're planning to be in Miami, so we will have all the coverage from there. But that's it's a ways away. Let's make it through Christmas first. How about that?
Let's make it through
early signing day.
Yeah, exactly. Get your priorities straight, Jake.
Oh God. But regardless, like I said, get over there. We'll have you covered on everything at DawgsHQ. That wraps it up for us today. For Palmer Toms and myself, Jake Roos, this has been another edition of Dog Walk Talk, presented to you by DawgsHQ.